Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session on token wheeling. The title of the session is Reinventing Municipal Energy and How Token Wheeling Delivers Simple, Green, and Affordable Power. So my name is Vasanie. Some of you may have seen me before if you're part of the NECOM technical committees. I coordinate the activities of the business partnership with government through NECOM. And one of the work groups that I actually lead together with the business lead is the working group on wheeling. So the focus of the session is to provide more information on token wheeling, which is a project that was started by Meridian in the concept at about 2023. And the intention is to develop an efficient implementation of wheeling for municipalities. So a number of options have been identified as to how we can do that through the NECOM work groups, etc. But token wheeling, I think, provides quite a novel solution, and the intent of the session is to provide more information on that and where it's sitting as a project and the implementation and execution requirements. So as you're probably aware, there's like several traditional wheeling, which is the wheeling option available currently. There are several challenges. For example, it doesn't enable flexibility with regards to multi-portfolio off-taker scenarios, as well as the issues related to a wheeling framework, which is the billing requirements, the revisions to an electricity supply agreement, and the infrastructure that's required to ensure that it operates efficiently. So in that way, Meridian has now developed this concept called token wheeling, and Frank from Meridian, who is on the panel today, will provide more information on that later, which gives us a great place to start to say who are to introduce some of the speakers that are on the panel today, as you may have been seen in the communication. So the first speaker is Nick Sims. He's from Sustainability Energy Africa. And Nick is probably widely known from the municipalities because of the work he does in supporting the municipalities, for example, with cost of supply studies, tariff design, reviews, tracking systems, including some training that has been done by Sustainability Energy Africa. And through his work with the municipalities, he has gained valuable insights on how wheeling is viewed from a municipal perspective, and he'll give us an oversight of that. The second speaker is Nhlanhla Ngidi, and he's the head of energy from South African Local Government Association. And he is actually playing quite a critical role on that side, where he advocates for policy reforms to enable municipality wheeling and for municipalities to be enabled to embrace the current energy transition going forward. The last speaker, as I indicated, is Frank Spencer, and he's currently the token wheeling lead, and he'll introduce himself properly when he goes into presentation mode. So before we start, some webinar keeping. The speakers will flight their presentations, so please be patient while this loads. The mics are muted for the session, and if you have questions to answer, you're welcome to do so in the chat box. If it's for a specific speaker, please indicate as such, and the speakers will then respond to the questions directly in the chat group. And if they don't get to do it in the chat group, we will then have a verbal session for questions after each presentation. So please hold your questions until then. There will be a poll that's posted, but Frank will talk to that later when he does his presentation. So on that note, I think let's start. Our first presenter is Nick Sims from SEA. Nick, thanks for participation, and you can proceed to start with a brief introduction of yourself, giving us a view of your background, etc. So I'm going to hand over to Nick. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Vasanie, and hello, everyone. I was just scrolling through the names, and I did recognize a few people that have come to some of our previous wheeling trainings, so it's good that you are persisting with the capacity building and learning more and more about wheeling. But I think that introduction was pretty good. Just to say, or to repeat, that at Sustainable Energy Africa, we've done a lot of work with municipalities and SALGA, and we've spoken to a lot of people that do the work on the ground, and we've spoken to some of the higher ups. So we do have a nice blended view of how municipalities view wheeling, and that's primarily what I'm going to be speaking about today. I will turn off my camera just to save the bandwidth, and then I'll get into my presentation now. Okay, so what I've decided to name my presentation is a municipal perspective, and that's wheeling from the ground up, because we know that wheeling has many different facets and factors in different corners of the landscape, but municipalities do play a very important role. And the way that municipalities view wheeling and the way that they embrace wheeling is a very important step in getting wheeling rolled out throughout the country. So just to give you a bit of context, we at Sustainable Energy Africa have done a lot of work with municipalities on wheeling specific topics over the years, and I'll just take you through a few of them. One of the most recent ones is we did a embedded generation and wheeling tracking project for NECOM, where we looked at how embedded generation and wheeling are progressing in the country, and that we did starting last year and ending now. And then the year before that, we did the SALGA status of wheeling report alongside SALGA. We also worked with the Western Cape government on their wheeling toolkit, which they rolled out to a lot of the Western Cape municipalities. And that's still a very important resource that's super useful. We've also done a lot of training. So through our various embedded generation programs and with NECOM, we've done wheeling training where a lot of municipalities have attended. And we've just gone through the basics, what wheeling is, how it works. And then in our most recent training with NECOM, we dived into some of the more nitty-gritty parts of wheeling. We've also developed a lot of wheeling resources along with legal teams and other experts to develop guidelines, discussion papers, revenue impact models, customizable documents, because a lot of municipalities aren't able to develop a wheeling policy from scratch because it's such a new concept. So we've tried to help with that as well. And then obviously it's been quite newsworthy in the last few years is the cost of supply studies and the training around that. And we've done a lot of cost of supply training and worked with municipalities on the fundamentals of tariff design. And this isn't really an opportunity to brag, but more of just a way of saying that we've spent a lot of time in the trenches with the municipalities or working on these sorts of topics. So we've been able to hear their triumphs and also share in some of their defeats as well. So based on our work with municipalities, they've given us an idea of how they view wheeling. And pretty much to sum it up in one sentence, many municipalities, I'd say most of them, want to embrace wheeling, but they have very real concerns. And I think it's a lot of those concerns that token wheeling is aiming to address. So some municipalities have implemented pilot studies on wheeling, and they are mainly the metros. Cape Town is a good example, Nelson Mandela Bay, Ekurhuleni. I see a few colleagues from Ekurhuleni on the call, and George. They are the main highlights so far, but Tshwane and we think City Power as well are also starting to think about pilot studies. But it's worth saying that they are all traditional wheeling as we know it, and mainly on a small scale. So a couple of generators, a couple of off-takers, one-to-one relationships, not aggregated or anything like that. And as I said on my previous slide, other municipalities, including these municipalities that are doing pilot studies and those that are interested in it, they support the idea of wheeling in theory. However, it's the practical challenges and reluctance from, say, council and the higher ups in the municipalities that prevent them from actually implementing it on the ground. So when we did our most recent trainings this year for wheeling with the municipalities, we asked municipalities what their concerns about wheeling were. And we got a few interesting answers. So first one is the regulatory and policy confusion. The NERSA wheeling policy came out earlier this year, and that definitely helped reduce the confusion, but there's still a lot of confusion around regulations and policy. Can they participate in virtual wheeling if they are in arrears, all of that sort of thing. Billing complexity. One big problem, especially in small municipalities, is how will they be able to monitor and bill effectively if there's many off-takers and many generators and lots of small transactions going on. The system capability, so IT systems and the metering systems at the moment are still lagging behind, and many municipalities flag that as a reason why it would be difficult to implement wheeling, especially on a large scale. Staff capacity is also another big problem. And it's important to note that it's not that the individual staff members don't have the skills. It's more that the teams are so small and they're doing many different jobs, and they just simply don't have the time to get to reconciling wheeling agreements and making sure that the billing is done, especially if it's a manual process. Another big query here, especially with the lens of the just transition, is subsidies and affordability. A lot of municipalities have many poor people that require subsidized electricity, and they're concerned that if wheeling takes over, they might lose their ability to subsidize those people that can't afford electricity. So they need to make sure that they can recover their subsidies and keep electricity affordable for those that aren't wheeling. And linked to that is just the general revenue impact. Municipalities, whether it's water and sanitation or electricity, the running a municipality is a difficult business. And if they suddenly notice that wheeling negatively impacts their revenue, they could be in big trouble. So that's where a lot of the hesitancy comes as well. And then another one, and this comes from the more the technical side, is especially if there's generators that are located inside the municipality, how will that affect voltage rise? Do they need to upgrade substations? What are the operational concerns around that? So a lot of the electrical staff have flagged that as a possible concern for them. And then lastly, scalability. At the moment, all of the municipalities that are piloting wheeling are working with a few generators and a few off-takers. But if it were to go to low voltage, which is the end goal, I imagine, how will they be able to scale that when there's many different transactions happening at one go? And then in theory, and this is to quote someone who filled this in on the survey, everything about wheeling is confusing, is their concern. So that's something that we need to address. So then, to summarize those talking points a bit more succinctly, the financial and revenue concerns are obviously one of the big ones. And without trying to read my slides, I'm sure you can read them. It's, as I mentioned, the impact on municipal revenue, and especially the need for cost-reflective tariffs and using cost of supply studies to ensure that whether a municipality uses the WEPS credit method or a use of system charge, they need to be able to recover their revenue so that they can remain financially sustainable. And then again, as I mentioned, the technical and operational challenges, whether it's the IT systems that they need to integrate with wheeling, billing tools, and the ERP systems and all of that, or if it's the actual bus bars, substations, and metering staff, there are a few technical and operational challenges that wheeling could present. And then from the regulatory side, as we mentioned, there seems to be a bit of confusion, whether it's from NERSA or Eskom or local municipalities that are next door doing something different. And the municipalities have all asked for clear and common wheeling framework and policies, just so that everything is clear and they don't need to try and figure it out by themselves. Then another big flag that the municipalities raise is that it is a complicated idea when you first encounter wheeling. Once you've spent a bit of time wrapping your head around it, it makes sense, but it's a new concept for a lot of people, and the lack of knowledge and understanding, especially up at the council level, makes it difficult to drive wheeling in a municipality when you don't really understand it. So a simplified process to embrace wheeling is what's needed. And that goes hand in hand again with scalability. In order to really unlock the potential of wheeling, you need it to be done on a large scale. And that's where the municipalities will need help as well. So looking forward, and this was something that I've discussed with a lot of municipalities as well, is in order to unlock that full potential, municipalities have listed a few things that they think are important things to address. And the first is the ability to monitor and especially reconcile wheeled energy on a time of use basis. So as an example, the customer buys 1,000 kilowatt hours and 30 of them are wheeled. They need to be able to split that out between the time of use period and be able to say what was wheeled and what was provided by the electricity and design the bill accordingly. And at the moment, you can do that if you have one or two customers that are wheeling, but to do it repeatedly for many customers is very difficult. They also need to make sure that wheeling won't erode their municipal revenue. They need those use of system charges to ensure that they can maintain their network, as well as provide subsidies for those that can't afford electricity. They also highlighted that because of their capacity constraints, one of their big things that they need is reduced financial and technical complexity. And I know that token wheeling is a big champion of this as well. In order to minimize fuss in the back office, they need reduced complexity. And although we've supported them with some Excel tools, we ideally need to move away from Excel-based tools into something that can work on a large scale. A lot of municipalities said they want to participate in wheeling, even if they can't, they don't have the staff capacity, or they are indebted to Eskom. They have customers that are inside their network that want to participate, and it would be an overall positive thing for the municipality, and they aren't able to participate for small technical reasons. So those municipalities that are keen to embrace it should be allowed to, and we should reduce the barriers to entry there. And then, as I mentioned earlier, more clarity on how wheeling works. At the moment, it seems like every municipality can have their own wheeling policy. However, if there's a system that's applied countrywide, that will make it a lot easier and less confusing for those municipalities. And then at the end, as you see, should these needs be met, municipalities will be ready to embark on their respective wheeling journeys with confidence, which is the most important part. If they can see that it works and that they can benefit from it, there's no reason why they won't be able to embrace it. So thank you for listening. I'll hand over and I'll take some questions at the end.
Okay,
Thanks so much, Nick. That was very insightful. And I think it was very valuable in terms of you providing your insights into your experience, which is on the ground experience, into what you've observed and what you've participated in with regards to wheeling specifically in the municipalities. So on that note, I think we should return to questions, and if we can manage that, any questions from the participants? We've got 87 people, including bots on board. So can we get any questions? Okay, let me kick it off so we can get the ball rolling. So Nick, from my perspective and in looking at what we've done within the NECOM process, so we've reviewed the wheeling rules that was released by NERSA, and we have a number of issues. So obviously, this is the first release of those rules, and there's an indication that those rules will be updated and revised in the future. And we've compiled some information in terms of where we see that the rules can be improved for practical implementation specifically, and in order to make wheeling more user-friendly, specifically for the municipalities. And I think one of the areas you touched on as one of your concerns was the clarity from NERSA in terms of what's required and what needs to be in place. So one of the things we've recommended through a briefing paper, which we have to submit to NERSA, is the availability of check sheets, templates, standard template documentation that could be used for municipalities to make the task much easier. So what is the practicality of being able to do that? And in our view, it would be sitting with NERSA, or do you see it happening differently?
Well, ideally, it needs to sit with NERSA. That's what a lot of the municipalities have said, and they welcomed that first report with the wheeling rules. And obviously, there were a lot of questions that came out of that, and it will require further refinement. But it does need to be held by a central body that doesn't have, say, private interests. A lot of municipalities have a natural mistrust of private companies, so it needs to be something like NERSA. And since they work with NERSA on their cost of supply studies and their tariff applications, it should be a one-stop shop for all of their energy utility needs. So I think it should be held with NERSA. I mean, that's obviously just my opinion. But that being said, other entities like NECOM, as an example, can feed into those processes because, as you mentioned earlier, traditional wheeling is just the first step. And I think once traditional wheeling gets up and running, it will soon be replaced by something else in the next iteration. So we can't just release one set of wheeling rules and then leave it at that. It's an ongoing process.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. So I think there has been one question so far that I can aware of. So the one relates to which of the municipalities are in good standing with Eskom. So I'm not sure if you want to talk to that, Nick, because in my understanding, that information is not available as to which ones are in good standing in terms of the classification of good standing.
Yes, thanks. And thanks to Murray for the question. I don't know which municipalities are in good standing. However, I would say that most of them are not in good standing. And then another problem with being in good standing, in inverted commas, is that it can change from one year to the next. So you might have a clean audit and be in good standing this year, but next year you might not be. And for a business inside a municipality to enter into a wheeling agreement without the certainty that they'll be able to continue wheeling because of their municipality's standing with Eskom is quite risky, and that's a big barrier to entry for businesses that want to get into longer term PPAs. So I'm not sure who's in good standing, but I don't think that's I don't think it's a lot of municipalities, and especially ones where there are big industries. I think a classic example is City Power. They're fighting the good fight on that front, saying that businesses should be able to wheel regardless of how City Power is standing with Eskom.
Okay, thanks, Nick. So I think there's one more question which we'll take, and the rest we can actually manage through the Q&A box as well. If you can stay on, Nick can just answer questions referenced specifically to your need. So the question is from Brian Waters. It's wheeling will definitely negatively impact municipality revenue. What measures can municipalities take to lessen the impact, reduce employment and maintenance?
Okay, thanks, Brian. I think the first step is that municipalities need to understand their electricity business. They need to understand what costs are fixed costs, what are demand costs, what are the classic kilowatt hour costs. To have a tariff all bundled into a kilowatt hour charge means that if there's reduced sales of electricity, there will be reduced revenue. So they need to unbundle their costs and have cost reflective tariffs. That's the first step. That's something they should be doing regardless of whether they plan to wheel or not. That's just industry best practice, and South Africa has lagged behind a bit in that sense. Partly because they want to balance affordability and not make charges too complex, but cost-reflective tariffs are most important. The good news is that the industries that would be wheeling first, so it's big industries, commercial industries, they often do have cost-reflective tariffs or tending towards cost-reflective, while residential customers might not. But you need to start with the 80% of the kilowatt hour sales go to the big businesses, and you need to unbundle their tariffs first. That way you can ensure that the revenue isn't negatively impacted.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Nick. Thanks for your presentation. And we'll take some more questions at the end of the session as well. So please stay on, and I think just respond to questions as they come online. Okay, I see Nhlanhla is online, so I'm going to move to the next speaker. Nhlanhla Ngidi, as I indicated previously in the introduction, is the head of energy in the South African Local Government Association. And his primary role, and I think his focus, is his advocating for policy reforms in order to enable municipalities to embrace the current energy transition. So Nhlanhla, if you can actually unmute and flight your presentation. Also, please provide a background of yourself and an introduction. Thanks, and thanks for joining, Nhlanhla.
Thank you very much, Program Director. And good morning to everyone in the seminar. I'm Nhlanhla Ngidi, and I'm from SALGA, and my job in SALGA is to play an advocacy role on policy regulation. Also at the center of all the current reforms that are taking place in the sector. As we all know, there's quite a lot that is happening, and municipalities seem to be at the center. It's like municipalities are in the middle of a cyclone, for a lack of a better word. Lots of reforms happening around them. Some are not streamlined or integrated, and the clarity also somewhat lacks here and there in terms of the roles and how does the future look like for the sector. I'll just make an example about 4 things that are currently taking place at the same time. Maybe even more than 4, but I'll just pick 4. Next year, April, that will be launching the energy wholesale market for the country. So which is a game changer, changing the game around how we've been doing things for the past 100 years. There's still no clarity around the role of municipality there. It looks pretty much like the first phase will be keeping most of the sector operations as as is, or as a status quo as is right now, where Eskom still remains, the bulk supplier and maybe also a middleman participating in the market on behalf of the distribution sector. So we might not see a lot happening there, especially with the changes in municipalities, with a select few that are really looking forward to take opportunities that comes with the introduction or the proliferation of the energy market. And then we're moving to, then at the same time, there is in the electricity distribution industry reform. That is a conversation at NECOM, which seeks also to reform the distribution sector. And obviously, not much clarity around the alignment of that reform together with what is happening with the energy market. And over and above that, there's just energy transition, which is also a form of reform that is taking place currently. And municipalities are also expected to be the institutions that are actually ensuring that just transition from the customer perspective and from moving to greener energies, obviously, without really any clarity around, how are we going to fund that, and what's the access framework to it. And there is no talk in government around how does JET link to all the other reforms that are happening, the market, the EDI reform, etc., etc. Then over and above that, there is a National Treasury Metro Trading Services reform that is happening, which is dealing with metro services reform, trading services reform, which is electricity, water, and solid waste. So also there, it's a form of reform, but no one knows the link to whatever other reforms are happening. And in the midst of that, there's concepts such as wheeling, which I think Sustainable Energy Africa, Nick, also the presentation from Nick, touches on a whole lot of concerns that we have. I mean, if I knew, I would have just stepped down, because Nick just covered most of the things that are our concerns and most of the things that we involved in, because we work very close with Sustainable Energy Africa, and they are our partner in implementing some of the capacity building and the capacity support to municipalities on these aspects of wheeling, cost of supply, and embedded generation and the works. So I think my introduction in a way tries to show you, in the midst of these reforms around or these new concepts and business models, your wheeling and other things that are happening, municipalities are like a human being that is standing in the middle of a cyclone. Everything is just happening around them. They don't know when this cyclone will tone down or settle, and when it settles, we don't know where are we going to go, what steps to take, because we are in the cross. So it's really a very unsettling place to be. And obviously as SALGA, we our job is to continue to try and be in the middle of all the conversations, whether it's NECOM, whether it's IGR, trying to ensure that we make government be accountable for providing the necessary clarity around all these changes that are taking place right now. So I think, as a first slide, I thought, let me just talk about the objectives of wheeling, but I don't think I spent time on that, and to save more time, Chair, because the basic principles or objectives of wheeling, I think, have been covered by Nick in his presentation. Why do we want to do wheeling? So I'm not going to really dwell much on that. But as per the wheeling framework, there are some of the principles that are in the wheeling framework that we have developed together at NICOM, and then some of them are around, the right to access to network, which talks to a whole lot of conversations that are happening now. When you have ESCOM, sometimes and understandably so, not really keen on allowing municipalities that are indebted to actually will, but also on another flip coin, that is actually bordering around the right to access as well, especially for that IPP that wants to will energy through to ESCOM and also municipalities to the customer. So there is a lot of things that are borderline restricting access, and that's why we have to be in that conversation of creating something very creative around, very innovative around how can we still allow this willing to happen in the midst of the death that is taking place. How can we protect ESCOM's interest while at the same time we're ensuring that there's universal access to grid as per the principles of the framework. Also, the use of system charges also cannot be avoided by the third-party willing transactions, and it cannot discriminate between customers supplied by a municipality or ESCOM through those transactions, and that's also incremental connection and administration charges can be raised by municipality for billing transactions or ESCOM, and that the energy wheeled can be accounted for ESCOM or municipality through a transaction where wheeled energy is accounted for by the licensee on the electricity bill of someone who's actually off-taking that electricity in terms of the supply agreement between the off-taker and the licensee. And also another principle is to acknowledge the supply of wheeled energy and the accounting mechanism that it will be implemented by contracting with the off-taker and the licensee through agreement. And that's also the license. When I say licenses, I'm talking ESCOM and municipalities that the licensee will only be the buyer of the wheeled energy if the licensee has entered into a PPA with the seller for a purchase of the wheeled energy from generation facility that is not connected to the network by the licensee. So I think Nick already covered some of the complications and some of the things that are concerns from municipalities around what are the contracts that must be in place around wheeling, and really what must be in those contracts, and what kind of capacity do we need to build in municipalities to understand those kind of contracts and to be able to be in the middle of the execution and understand what needs to take place. And lastly, municipalities can be intermediates between someone who's producing and willing, and that is not connected to the licensing network, and an off-taker where off-taker is connected within the licensing network. So this is just a principle around relationships as well. So this is just a willing relationship. I'm not going to go through it. I think it's what you would find in the willing framework. If you go look at it, just we're unpacking some of these trading relationships between wheelers, between the generator and the seller, buyer and off-taker, and also the municipal distributor. So these are some of the trading relationships that you'll find around willing concepts. So what is the compensation mechanisms for willing? So there's in the framework itself, there's two. There's one that is around energy credits for wheeled energy, and that one is simpler. And I think in my presentation, and I was really requested to dwell more on this part, which is the token credits. I'm going to talk to it in the next coming slide, but at a very high and generic level around how do we view it as SALGA for municipalities. My presentation is not going to dwell into the technicalities around it. This option is around full tariff charges that are raised for all energy supplied through the meter, and it includes approved fixed charges and contribution to surpluses and subsidies, and then also the wheeled energy will be then credited as a separate transaction to the customer bill using the wheeled energy kilowatt hours multiplied by the credit rate. And also the wheeled energy may not be greater than the consumer energy per time of the use period. And I guess that's why, there's that gravitation towards the token as well, because we're trying to, avert those kind of situations where you have, you might find, those inaccuracies in bills where we have wheeled energy becoming greater than the consumed energy, and then it becomes a bit of a dispute between, your IPP and the network operator as well. Also, effective use of system charge for wheeled energy will be the full tariff charges minus wheeling credit rate. So this is the option one, which is more something that's is looked at as simpler. And I'm not going to go through option two, but it's about separating wheeled energy on the bill from licensee supplied energy. So this one is a more complex kind of a concept, and I think we still need to drill more into the support to municipalities for understanding this one, but also the situation of municipalities now. I think we want to go for more simpler mechanisms for wheeling, because the concept itself, we haven't really decoded it to be user friendly for everyone. Now, what is token wheeling and why does it matter? Obviously, this is a streamlined mechanism. It allows the generated electricity in one location, often from renewable resources, to be transferred through the grid and consumed elsewhere using a token-based credit system. So this is why it is simpler. Credit, that's basically what you use. You cannot use anything more than that, and almost just like your prepaid electricity, but maybe not as simple as that. But for municipalities also, this offers practical, low barrier, rapid deployable pathway, and also to unlock that private energy investment into their systems. And why should municipalities care? As SALGA, we think this will enable more energy into the system without municipalities having to fund a new generation. We know there's a financial situation. Also attracting the private sector renewables, and also let municipality retain the relevance in this, to be liberalized energy future. So how do we, what is the reinventing of municipal energy, in terms of the shift from control to enablement? So at this point, we're at it's an inflection point as municipalities. We were single buyers and as distributors, but future markets require us to become now not network operators, enablers, platform providers. It's a whole new concept for us, 360-degree change that we need to also adapt as municipalities. But this for wheeling, this fits perfectly. This token wheeling fits perfectly into the shift around wheeling, because municipalities don't have to generate power. They enable access to the grid. They can monetize network services while ensuring customers have alternative supply routes. They also remain central to the energy governance, planning and balancing, even with multiple market players. And also, we see this as a fundamentally modern future-proof energy role for municipalities. Sorry, colleagues. Then why token wheeling is simple for municipalities? I think that's what. When we talk to municipalities, we try to move them towards these concepts and unpack why this is easy. So this simplified complex wheeling settlements using tokens or credits to represent energy flows. reduces administrative overhead for municipalities. The simplicity includes standardized billing and settlement instead of monthly manual reconciliations, automated tracking of generation and consumption, clear governance structures that protects revenues, reduce disputes because fuel energy is traceable through tokens, ease of entry, even for municipalities still building wheeling capacity. Also it turns wheeling into a plug-and-play product rather than a big spoke exercise, that is complicated. So why token wheeling is green? It's that, well, obviously this is wheeling will allow more renewable energy, without really municipalities requiring new funds for new projects because of their financial situation. So there's a lot of values around that, including jets, clean energy, the works. And obviously we're trying to reduce dependence on carbon heavy ESCOM supply at this point. So why is this affordable? So it will help municipalities to introduce more generation into the system, lowers overall energy cost, and improve reliability. So I think, this for now, at a utility scale, it's a discussion that still needs to be unpacked, because with the IPP program, where ESCOM is an off-taker, we really are not sure. We really are not seeing or haven't seen any proof of, renewables that we've integrated into our grid really yielding affordability for our country and for our people. So, but maybe it's not a conversation we need to have here. But definitely for my house, my embedded generation in my house, I can directly see the benefits of a reduction of a municipal bill or ESCOM bill. But for a normal customer, for them, it sounds like a fallacy when you say, hey, renewables will make your life easy and it will make your bills to be cheaper or electricity to be cheaper. So maybe another conversation for another day. So strategically, how do municipalities benefit? It will safeguard municipalities in a transforming electricity market. So for them to transform in a very safe way, not necessary to expose themselves. So strategic gains may include, open new network service revenue streams, retain customers who might detect for defects from grid, strengthen municipal role as energy market coordinators. Also encourage investment into grid strengthening and smart metering. Enhances municipal independence from ESCOM generation shortfalls. It also positions municipalities as innovators and partners in the national reform. So as I conclude, I just want to talk about the leadership role around this, over and above what we really are doing with the likes of NECOM and also more especially Sustainable Energy Africa, whom I think we are really holding hands together around, these subject matters and the support to municipalities. But our key supportive actions going forward, obviously, we need to develop model wheeling frameworks. I think we have guidelines, but I think we need to start looking at, how can we guide through a document municipalities around this token wheeling. So we need to maybe enrich that guide that we already put together with Sustainable Energy Africa to start talking and start unpacking more the concepts of token wheeling, because we see it as simpler. So obviously we continue to advocate for regulatory clarity, and then build capacity programs for municipal engineers, planners, and also CFOs, because CFOs must be involved in this, because we start talking numbers. So CFOs must understand these concepts. Also facilitates the IPP municipal matchmaking and pilot projects, and also influence the EDI reform and energy market restructuring to safeguard the municipal revenue. So all these reforms, there must be clarity, and we must ensure that there cannot be change or discussion about us without us in that discussion. And also SALGA must become the lighthouse, showing municipalities how to move from vulnerability to opportunity. So this is my presentation, Chair, and thank you very much. I hand back to you.
Okay, thank you, Nhlanhla. Very insightful presentation. I think it was very valuable that you touched on the benefits that can be seen from token wheeling, and also how it can be advantageous to the municipalities and to the individual customer in terms of how it can be proposed going forward. So on that note, I will take some questions from the panel, from the participants that have joined. I haven't seen any so far.
So, sorry, if you can, I apologize. I'm actually in a public space, so I got distracted. If you can please, just if there was a question that you asked, if you can please just repeat. Sorry.
Okay, there hasn't been a question that's been asked as yet. I think somebody has requested the presentation, but that will follow later. So I think from my side, Nhlanhla, from your experience that you've had currently on the ground with the wheeling requirements, do you think, like the similar question I proposed to Nick, the value of what you're requesting now, saying, could there be a handbook, for example, on token wheeling to support the concept, as well as a handbook then with summaries of templates and guidelines for municipalities on how they can utilize and implement wheeling more efficiently?
Yes, no, definitely. I think that there is a gap there, but I think the good thing we have a base guideline that we have. I think we need to discuss with Sustainable Energy Africa, obviously through GIZ, who is our sponsor, to look at reviewing the guideline and start unpacking the token wheeling concepts for municipalities to have that kind of handbook, if you like, to guide them in navigating this concept.
Okay. All right, great. All right, so we'll take some more questions at the end. I know you indicated you're in a public space, so if you could just stay online, and we're going to have a question and answer session at the end as well. And we'll get to the next speaker before we get to that part of the session. Okay, there is one question, actually pay residents back. So the problem with suggestion of residents feeding back into the grid is that the cost of a bi-directional meter runs into 50,000 Rand in some instances and starts at 8,000. Our municipality doesn't actually pay residents back for those meters. So I think that's just a comment. We'll move on from that. So I'm going to move on to the next presentation. And that presentation is from Meridian Economics, and I'm going to leave Frank, who's going to do his introduction and his bio all by himself. So thanks, Frank, and you can start your presentation and start.
Thanks, Vasanie, and good morning to everyone in the audience. Thanks so much for taking time out of what I know for many is a very busy end of the year. So really appreciate the time to come and join us this morning. Yeah, to look at in particular token wheeling within the broader wheeling context. So thank you, Nick and Nhlanhla, for your presentations to set the scene. I really appreciate your time as well. Very briefly on me, I'm an engineer by background, although I haven't done too much direct engineering. I suppose I have. I've worked in the renewable sector for over 20 years now. Was involved with some of the very first rooftop systems built in the early 2000s, as early as 2002, in fact, and then worked on off-grid projects from 2003. And then from the early 2010s, as the renewable sector started to gain traction, I found myself really working within the renewable sector, wearing many different hats, from running teams that built rooftop projects, utility scale projects, to leading on financing or setting up new finance facilities for embedded generation. And I've also spent a lot of time working, wearing various SAPIA hats as the PV Industry Association. I currently sit on the governing committee there, and I've worked on a number of regulatory related matters from the early 2010s in terms of seeing standards promoted and really the renewable space being unlocked at all scales. That's been something I've always wanted to see. And part of the reason why, when I had the opportunity to join Meridian to partner with them on token wheeling, I jumped at that because as I got to understand the token wheeling concept within the broader wheeling framework, I realized the unlock that this might be able to create within the municipal space for the benefit of not only customers in the municipalities, but also for the municipalities themselves. So on that note, let me share the presentation. There we go. It should be up. I hope you all can see that well. If there's any problems, just let me know. And yeah, just note my email address is there. You will be getting this presentation. So, you know, if you want to reach out to me afterwards, you're most welcome to do that. Right, so I think we've looked at what wheeling is. I'm sure many on this call know what it is, but perhaps I just want to highlight the point that it really is. It's a little bit of a fiction, actually, because when electricity flows into the grid, it goes into a big pool, and it's more about the technical challenges at the point of connection to absorb that energy. The electrons themselves don't actually move from the point of injection to the customer, which is almost implied from the term wheeled. And certainly the accounting that gets set up for wheeling works that way, that it tracks the energy from the generators through, say, Eskom, through the municipal network to the customer, and then does all the crediting from an accounting perspective along the way. I think that's the heart of wheeling. And I mean, we've seen some illustrations, but perhaps again, just to show very briefly, the sort of conception of wheeling is that, you know, normally municipalities buying electricity from Eskom, providing it through their own distribution network to their customers. And then along comes a generator, signs a power purchase agreement to bring that power to the customer. And in the conventional wheeling, that energy is assumed to flow parallel to what the municipality supplies. And on paper, this might look all very simple, but the reality is it's actually quite complex. And I think Nhlanhla and Nick have touched a little bit on this, but, you know, obviously the generator needs to have permission to connect and have, connect there and all of that. But apart from that, you need, in conventional wheeling, you need to set up new tariffs for wheeling. You need to ensure that your customer has an up-to-date smart meter that can do time of use metering in 4 quadrants. You need to set up a new invoicing methodology to allow for the credits of this wheeled energy. And you need new use of system agreements with the customers to allow third parties to deliver energy. And of course, the moment municipalities have to implement this, it comes with significant challenges. And I think that's what we've seen. Although, you know, Eskom itself started with wheeling a good number of years ago, Eskom's own implementations are far from being fully automated, still a lot of manual work happening, and still working on monthly reconciliations when, of course, in the conventional wheeling world, NERSA's pushing to like hourly reconciliations. And then certainly within the municipal environment, there's all these challenges that have also been highlighted. You know, what are the financial implications? How can we get approvals for this? You know, the complexity of getting new tariffs approved with NERSA, setting up the new supply agreements, and perhaps one of the most challenging, to integrate all of this into the billing system that bills the customer. And ultimately, that leads to, certainly for small customers and even prepaid customers, that there's either really high transaction costs because of like the new meters, or they simply can't access the sort of wheeled energy. And so, as you can see in that graph there, we sort of argue that the sort of red slice is what the current wheeling can unlock. But actually, if we could make it a whole lot simpler with token wheeling, we could unlock a much bigger slice of the pie of customers in the CNI and even in the residential space, particularly in municipalities, as shown in the larger blue square there. And of course, the moment you're wheeling from Eskom, if you're not just wheeling in the municipality, you have the issue of good standing that was highlighted that could create significant challenges, whether you're doing conventional wheeling or virtual wheeling. And thus, I think we've seen municipalities really grappling, and very few municipalities actually having implemented some form of wheeling to date because of this complexity. And even with virtual wheeling, which in some senses allows municipal customers to access wheeled power without the municipality having to participate, there's a lot of challenges in virtual wheeling. The customer actually pays twice because they pay their municipal bill and then they have to pay the IPP that's providing them power. The municipality has to be in good standing, and if at the end of the month they're not, then that allocation that would have come from the virtual wheeling side to that customer gets lost, and they don't get it. And the virtual entity that's actually managing all of the virtual wheeling gets paid cash by Eskom as a credit, and so you take Eskom risk and time delay to get paid. And so, in principle, I think if you're Mezzanine and Vodacom with thousands and thousands of offtake points, you can make it work. But for smaller entities within the municipalities, even virtual wheeling from the Eskom side is incredibly challenging. So when Meridian Economics and Javier Steyn as the MD were looking at this problem, like we've seen with all of this complexity, they really started to think, is there not a way that we can get rid of all of this complexity? So basically get rid of the need for tariffs, smart meters, new billing integration, and even the conceptualization of having a third party supplying the energy, and leave the municipality supplying all the energy at regular tariffs to the customers. Could we construct a way to do this? And this is where token wheeling was invented. And it's very important to note that although we've called it token wheeling, and we might change the name in the future, it's not wheeling as defined, say, by the Electricity Regulation Act, which says it's energy moved from a generator to a customer over a third-party network. Because we move away from following the energy or following the power to financializing the value and following the money. And at the heart of this principle is this idea that that generator that I spoke about, if they inject power into the grid, and that energy becomes the municipalities, then there's an avoided cost that the municipality experiences as they did not buy that energy from Eskom. This is a little bit similar to like where rooftop projects export and they get a credit. We basically, that saving that the municipality experiences, an avoided cost from Eskom, we capture as a digital credit note, what we call an electricity credit token, and that gets passed to the customer to settle their bill. Now, that's a lot to take in with text and words, so let me try to explain that a bit with this slide. So here we have the municipality supplying the customers, and the generator comes along and they get technical approval to connect to the municipality and they inject that power. The first thing we do is we leave the billing to the customer exactly the same. The municipality bills a customer at the regular tariff and supplies all the energy. There's no longer the red line of energy of the municipality coming to the customers. And then we introduce the token wheeling system, and that little icon with the computer in the wheel is meant to mean the token wheeling platform. And what happens is when that energy is injected by the generator to the municipality, as I said, there is a reduced cost from Eskom. There's an avoided cost from Eskom. And the municipality authorizes the token wheeling system to issue a digital credit note for that, what we call the electricity credit token. That digital credit token then gets sold to the customer through, instead of a power purchase agreement, it's now a token purchase agreement. And then this is where token wheeling is very clever, is that when the customer comes to pay their bill with the municipality, that bill that they receive, the regular bill, they settle the bill using this credit note, which is a bearer credit note. You could consider it even to be a voucher. They settle their bill with the credit note and the balance in cash. And again, I know that's a lot to take in, but basically what we've done is we've captured, instead of working with energy, we've looked at that energy value to the municipality, that it creates an avoided cost. digitize that as a credit note. And that's already done. As I said, many municipalities will credit where it's a customer injecting the power. That generator could be a customer with excess generation. Basically, we're making that credit note transferable to others rather than just being allocated to the customer. So let me show you a worked example with that. Let's assume 12 o'clock on a weekday, because of course Eskom is supplying the municipality at Muniflex. And let's just say at this particular hour in the day, the Muniflex tariff that the municipality is buying from Eskom is R1.63. Then the customer at that hour buys all the electricity from the municipality, and let's say their tariff is R2.40. Now, this could be a time of use tariff, this could be a regular flat tariff, this could even be a prepaid or post, or analog meter. It really doesn't matter because of the way that this is a crediting system. Then the generator comes along, and basically the customer signs an agreement to buy tokens from the generator. So previously, maybe they would sign a power purchase agreement at R1 a kilowatt hour. Now they buy the tokens, say, at R1 a kilowatt hour. The generator then injects the power into the municipality, creating an avoided cost of R1.63 because now that energy that came from the generator to the municipality is energy that the municipality didn't buy from Eskom. So there is that avoided cost, and those tokens get issued at R1.63. So you can see already the customer has saved 63 cents because they've paid R1 and they've received something of value worth R1.63. Now, when the customer comes to pay their bill, they pay the bill partly with those tokens worth R1.63 and the balance in cash. So if we look in the top right-hand corner, then just to show you like a worked example, let's say the customer in this hour uses 200 kilowatt hours. They would then get a bill for all of their energy at R2.40, and the bill is R480. Then the IPP sells 100 kilowatt hours to the customer, and 100 kilowatt hours is injected into the grid. There's now an avoided cost to the municipality that they've now not bought the 100 units at R1.63. So the municipality has saved R1.63. They experience the saving, and they allow the credit note to be issued at R1 at that value, R163. That gets passed to the customer. And now when the customer comes to pay their bill of R480, they pay with their electricity credit note with 163 and the balance in cash of 317. Now, if you note here, the municipality saved R163 on the one side with Eskom, and now have accepted the credit note worth 163. So the municipality is revenue neutral right now. They've not made more money, they've not made a loss. But what they have done is enabled their customer to access cheaper, clean, green renewables power. And also note they've still made their full margin because they've still sold all the energy at R2.40. So the sort of 77 cents that they were making on every kilowatt hour, they're still making that 77 cents, and they're still charging the customer all the regular other fees in terms of supplying electricity. And so as you can see, this massively simplifies the implementation for municipalities. You don't need new tariffs. You don't need new use of system agreements. You don't need to change the invoicing system to put those credits on the bill. You don't need to shift your customers onto postpaid or smart meters. Even prepaid customers can access this because the vendor of the STS tokens, and don't get confused between STS tokens, which are energy tokens for prepaid meters, and these credit note tokens, which are digital credit notes. Those vendors can buy and transact with the prepaid customers on their behalf and then pass those credit notes to the municipality. And in all of this, the municipal revenues remain protected because your margin remains the margin applies the same. As you know, municipalities are now meant to do cost of supply studies. This makes it a lot simpler to do those studies as well. You haven't got the complexity of trying to manage wheeling tariffs and different impacts to the bottom line. And that the customer also remains solely that of the municipality. You haven't now passed that customer partially to another supplier of energy. It's still fully the municipal's customer to manage and look after, also makes it a lot simpler. And as I said, this system allows LV customers, which currently cannot access wheeled energy to access power. There is a way to do it for prepaid customers as well. And of course, if you're allowing your entire municipal rate space to access cheaper, clean power, well, that protects your rates, because then customers are more likely to stay in the municipality where they can get cheaper, greener power, and it's reducing their costs, which is obviously good for customers and good for the municipality. And it's important to note we've also had Weber Wenzel doing a lot of legal work on this for us. And it's actually supported by some of the Pinsent Mason legal work that was done, CDH legal work done historically on embedded generators. That because this is a credit note system and credit notes are being issued for avoided cost, this doesn't trigger procurement. So there's no need for municipalities to go through procurement for this. They're not procuring anything. They're providing a service like they provide other services. And this service is, allowing these credit notes to be wheeled to other customers. And because it's not energy, and because we don't fall into the technical definition of wheeling, all of the NERSA requirements around wheeling and trading licenses, I should have also said there in terms of, time matching, et cetera, they're not required either. So this makes it really simple for municipalities to implement. And then, as I said, what customers get is that all customers can access lower cost, cleaner electricity. And of course, also the green attributes of that power, which is super important for many customers who, and we see this. I mean, I don't want to mention, but we've chatted to many property groups and many hospital groups who are all wanting to get to a sort of carbon neutrality in the next 10 years or so, and struggle when they have lots of facilities within municipalities. This allows them to access those green attributes, whether it's renewable energy certificates or other forms for their carbon accounting. They can have all that value given to them as well. And thus they're likely to stay where they are. They don't have to look at moving out of the municipality they're in, because they have these requirements to be carbon neutral. So then, to summarize with the table, I've also included the sort of small scale embedded generation, which is the sort of behind the meter projects. I think what's important to note with SSHCG is that certainly we've seen that when you're doing behind the meter projects, that does have a very big impact on the revenue of municipalities, because it fully reduces the tariff. Municipalities don't make margin on that behind the meter power. So certainly where power is wheeled to a customer, it is of value to the municipality in terms of revenue impact, because they can still remain revenue neutral, whether they are procuring the power or wheeling, or with token wheeling. And just a note on the revenue impact. I mean, in my conversations with municipalities, I've often noted that where they are thinking of procuring the energy themselves and running into the challenges of 3 years and needing needing treasury approval to do longer than 3 years, that they often think that saving can be credited to their bottom line. But the reality is that because municipalities are meant to be doing these cost of supply studies and submitting these as part of their tariff applications to NERSA, that if a municipality saves on the input cost side, on the electricity side, they are meant to pass that on in the tariffs to their customers. So even if municipalities are procuring directly from IPP's green power, it doesn't necessarily mean that the municipality is going to improve their revenue position off the back of that, because the margin, if you like, that they can make on electricity is meant to be fixed or regulated by NERSA, and the value passed on. And as you can see, there's lots of other unlocks that just makes it far easier than conventional wheeling to implement, particularly around the key municipal implementation components. So where we are in the process is that we are looking for municipalities to run pilots. I guess this has been an idea for 1.5 years now. But Meridian really wants to see this get traction, and that's part of why I joined the team to try and get this to get some proper traction on this idea. So we're looking for municipalities who might be keen to explore this a little bit further, and the poll that we'll run in a minute will talk to that. If you are a Munich who's interested, yeah, we're quite keen to start early next year to get a pilot up and running, to run for maybe an initial period of 1 to 3 years, depending on what's required. There's certainly no lack of generators out there looking for opportunities. In fact, there are many built systems with excess capacity that would love to be able to have that excess create value for others. The requirements are not too onerous. Obviously, municipal council would need to approve the pilot, and there does need to be some integration to the settlement side of the billing system. What we've seen is that for a lot of systems that should be straightforward, because most municipalities have third parties that collect revenue and pass that to them, and this isn't too much different to that. And as I say, ideally from the generator side, because certainly I think customers will queue up to buy. They're desperate to get cheaper green power. But where there are embedded systems with excess capacity that are being curtailed, that would be first prize, because we could very quickly bring that energy into the token wheeling system. Or where there's wheeling happening already, that this might enable more customers to access wheeling. So perhaps where municipalities already have wheeling, this could open the opportunities further. And certainly we are aware of a lot of projects that are sitting in municipalities wanting to deliver to customers that can't get built because of the challenges with wheeling. That would certainly unlock those opportunities. So I may have probably created a lot of questions. I haven't had a chance to look at that. But yeah, let me pause there. I'm very happy to take questions. My contact details are there. You're very welcome to reach out should you like to chat further on that. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Frank. Great presentation. And I think I have been part of this process since the concept note started, and we've had a few presentations already from Meridian on the NECOM platform through the technical committees. And I see your presentations actually progress quite nicely to make it a lot more simplified, because it's a bit to get your head around to start off with. So thanks for that, Frank. There's quite a few questions that have come up, and I'm going to go through them very quickly with you. So the first one is from Ricardo Hansby, and he says, who will manage token issuing, trading platform, and how will this be done? I think you touched on it a bit, but maybe if you can give more information on that now.
Yeah, so the intent is to develop an open architecture so that many entities could use the architecture, and we want to be one of the first entities to be able to deliver that service to municipalities. So the intent is not for us to almost be a monopoly doing token wheeling or credit note tokens, but we do want to be the first to enable this and allow municipalities to access the service. Yeah.
Okay, so in the trial phase, you'll basically lead that platform initiative, right?
Correct. As
okay,
Meridian.
great.
Yeah.
All right. So there is another one related to that, and that is there a delay in the issuing of the ECT to the PPA supplier due to verification? Is there administration delay of a month, as in the normal wheeling agreements?
So our envisionment is that really the metering data, and of course the metering on the generator side would be the same as you would see for any other generator, where you need to have the credibility and accountability and integrity of the data. Those methodologies are all already set up. So there would be the metering that would generate the data around the energy produced, and there would probably be check meters from the municipality. That energy, once we have that data, and we would be receiving that data in near real time, we would then issue the tokens in near real time. And then those credit notes, when they get passed or traded, I mean, the one point I didn't make is they could actually be traded from one customer to another customer. And that trading could happen at any time in the future. And we envisioned that those credit notes would have like a shelf life of maybe up to 3 years. We're still looking at that. And by shelf life, I mean that they can be used with the municipality at any point in time. But in all probability, they will be used when the customer comes to settle their bill with the municipality. So that happens on a monthly basis that the bill is issued. And at that point, when the customer would settle the bill with the municipality, they would use the tokens they hold at that point in time to settle with the municipality. So theoretically, it could happen in real time, that whole loop. But and we're still working on that. It might also be a little bit to the municipality's discretion. I mean, yeah, but that's the intent, that at the settlement point that the credit notes are used. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think another related question, and this comes from Jenny Cargill, is related to who should own manage the token platform. It relates to the one you had answered previous to that. I think ideally, in your view, who should own and manage that token platform?
Yeah. So, I mean, initially it's going to be something we develop and have the intent is to have an open standard around the actual tokenizing platform. And then, yes, it will be a commercial business because there are going to be costs to run it. I mean, what we've seen is that the costs are really, really small to run systems like this. So, perhaps in the region of 1% of the value of the actual energy being traded will be the cost to manage the token wheeling system. And so there would be no cost to the municipality. That cost would probably be absorbed by the generator when the tokens get created. And thereafter, again, it's very low cost in these digital systems to manage and move tokens around. But yeah, the conceptualization is that the first system issued or the first architecture up and running would be a commercial entity set up by Meridian. Yeah.
Okay, so I think just let's move on to some governance questions, maybe. Another one from Jenny, is there any requirement for Eskom approval to do the token wheeling?
So not if it's happening just in one municipality. So certainly for our pilots, we're looking to do it just in a municipality, and then there's no impact on the Eskom side at all. So Eskom approval or participation is not required if you're just in the municipality, which would be the case if a municipality is doing their own internal conventional wheeling. Where Eskom would be necessary, and I didn't talk to this more for time, but also wanted to get the core ideas across, is that we would love to do this with Eskom as well. You could have Eskom to Eskom token wheeling, or you could have the generator sitting in the Eskom network and then the buyer sitting in the municipality. And then when the buyers receive, the avoided cost then would be the WEPS less losses tariff as it is on conventional wheeling.
Okay.
The credit tokens would go to the customer. Customer would use them to settle their bill with the municipality. And then the municipality would use them to settle their bill with Eskom. So there would be an extra step in the movement of the credit note. Now, of course, for that to work, yes, you would need Eskom's buy-in and support. The moment the generator or the customer are sitting in the Eskom network. Yeah.
So I think in that, Frank, based on how the way wheeling was pitched and the different scenarios you can get from Eskom to Munich to customer, it would be valuable for your presentation to have those scenarios in there in that payment slide where you do the animation as well going forward, just to add some value to that to understand how it works. Because I was also thinking during the presentation now, can the Munich actually buy tokens, especially if the energy is cheaper? Wouldn't it be beneficial for them, etc.?
For sure.
All right, so
I do have the slides to that. I just didn't put them in this deck because of the focus on the municipal side. But certainly if someone's interested to see the mechanisms around Eskom, what's also interesting is where there is this challenge of municipalities struggling to settle their bills with Eskom, is we can also tokenize, in some sense, escrow the Eskom value at the same time. So there actually is a way, obviously, if the municipality agrees to this, that we can also use the tokenized system to help address the municipal debt issue with Eskom. But that's a whole presentation in itself. So it's part of the reason why I didn't open that can of worms. But certainly token wheeling can be expanded to help address some of those challenges where municipalities are not or struggling to settle with Eskom to actually help catch that value independently. Yeah.
Okay, so another governance question. How do you ensure the MSCOA compliance and validate these digital tokens? So that refers to the Municipal Standard Chart of Accounts, where you have to be transparent with your information.
Yeah, so all of this information, all the transactional information would be available for the municipality to verify and check. So as we understand it, in terms of and where the integrations happen within the municipal accounting and ledgering, again, I haven't shown all of that transactional information, but all of the checks and balances that are needed from the system are available, and that data would be available for auditing purposes. Yeah.
Okay, so similar question. How are we taking account systems on the token wheeling journey, as ECTs are financial transactions and must be managed within unique financial management systems, etc.? So I think you've pretty much answered that one. And that was from Lawrence Duque. So a follow-up question that came from Kevin Dingle on his previous one is, would the ECT have different value that is linked to the time of use tariff? And would the ECT hold this value for an extended period of time?
Yeah, so just to make the point again that the ECT value is at the tariff applicable at the time of injection, the avoided cost. So typically if it's injecting into a municipality, then the tariff is Muniflex, and Muniflex obviously has a summer, winter, peak, standard, off peak. And depending on which of those tariff applies at the time the energy is injected, that's the value that's used for the credit generation. So if it was, say, off peak at 60 cents and 100 kilowatt hours went in at that moment in time, then the value of the credit note would be 60 Rand. If it was, say, 5 Rand in winter peak and 100 kilowatt hours were injected, then the value of that credit note token would be 500 Rand. So absolutely, it's a function of the avoided cost. But once the token is generated, it's a Rand value, because it's now a 500 Rand token with all of the energy information sitting there. But that 500 Rand token is then usable as a credit note, as a bearer credit note to settle bills. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So one compliment for you, and then a question to follow again. So from Mpaputi Nkwana, excellent concept, very smart to use the financial transactions to manage this process, avoided costs, but still recovering cost-reflective use of system rates. This might be a silly question, so I think there are no silly questions. But the phenomenon of ghost vending, is there a mechanism in place to validate the credit tokens used by customers to credit the account with the municipality, besides accurate metering on the municipality side?
Absolutely. So this is a core part of the architecture of the token wheeling platform, is the ability, we need to have the ability to prevent people inventing tokens or making up tokens. So the token generation engine is very closely linked to the metering data coming from the IPP, and there will be a number of validation processes there to make sure that that data is correct and legit, that the IPP or the generator did in fact make that energy and inject it into the grid, and it will be auditable and checkable against the municipality's own check meters as well. And then from that data, you will be able to run checks and balances to ensure that the credit notes that are generated actually match the energy data from the generator meters. And then once the tokens are created, in some senses, they're immutable. You can't change them. You can't change their value. I haven't gotten into the architecture, but the architecture we're looking to use we're looking to use basically a digital ledger that would then have all that traceability and accountability and immutability as part of its core functionality to ensure that you can't make up credit note tokens. Because of course, yes, I mean the same. On the STS side, it's a different. Similar but different, because there people are vending tokens without getting the money. In this case, we look to make that basically impossible. Yeah.
All right, so I think from what I see in the chat as well as the Q&A, there's one last question here that has not been answered, and that's from Clyde Mallinson. And it's, does the offset saving by the municipality include all costs per kilowatt hour, such as legacy charges, rural electrical subsidy charges, and the like?
Yes, because it's the avoided cost to the municipality. So when the municipality doesn't buy 1 kilowatt hour from Eskom, they avoid all those costs from Eskom on the Muniflex tariff. So it's the total kilowatt hour component. Doesn't have to be, but that's our conceptualization. That the value of the token is linked to the avoided cost that the municipality experiences. And that would then be all of the related energy charges in Muniflex to the municipality.
Yeah, and I think were you specific about these charges, like indicating specifically legacy charges, etc. It will actually transpire once the tariff unbundling is complete, that accurate allocation of the costs between the actual energy cost versus those that are related to subsidies charges and time of system use charges, etc., between transmission, distribution, and Eskom and the generation capacity charges will then become more clear.
Absolutely.
But for yeah. Okay. So just to bear that in mind, that's the forthcoming attraction with tariff unbundling. Okay.
Not
And
sure
then
it's
I
an
think
attraction, but it's coming, yeah.
for most people, it's not an attraction, that's for sure. Okay. So some other questions that were in the chat earlier, and I think I can see Nick is still online. So let me get to that very quickly. So there was a question that you did answer, Frank, and it was from Dion Lowe. But a part of the question was, wheeling within municipality networks are already allowed, and is it happening? And I think that was a question that I had for Nick earlier based on the wheeling tracker that was that he referred to. So Nick, just in terms of that, I know that's not a public document. So for the public interest, is that something that can be communicated?
Yes, so some municipalities are wheeling, but those that are doing it mainly on a pilot basis. So, sorry, I can try and start my video, but let's just see if the internet holds up. Sorry, as I was saying, most of the municipalities that are wheeling are doing so on a pilot basis or a very small scale. So it's not open to anyone to participate in. And so far, there's only very few, handful, say 3 or 4, that have been doing it for a meaningful period of time. So while it is going ahead in certain municipalities, it's certainly not widespread or prolific.
All right. And then another one from Lawrence Duca is, how do we encourage talk to private sector partners within the Munich territory who can develop projects that may be included in the Munich Future Wheeling initiatives?
So that's an interesting one. I suppose from a municipal perspective, that they can engage with those customers and talk about potentially piloting a project. However, yeah, there's no set protocol on the best way to engage with the private sector. Obviously, private sector goals don't always align with municipal goals, so they sometimes need to work out their differences and come up with a combined path.
Okay. Thanks, Nick. So I think another question that came up that could apply, Frank, I think I'll start with you in terms of a token wheeling perspective and how it can be implemented. And then Nick, if you want to add later based on your understanding of how traditional wheeling is working on the Munichs currently. And it comes from Pete Basima from the city of Tshwane, and he says, it seems some of the complexity in this new area of the new renewable energy stems from trying to do everything in one go or step. And maybe it'll be better to try it and do it in multiple steps. And can we do it in phases? So I can talk from my understanding, but I'll leave it to the experts in that. So Frank, from a token wheeling perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we want to do with the sort of pilot concept, is not to say, let's try get every Munich on board and Eskom and implement, the gold diamond standard of token wheeling or wheeling, but really to say, if the desire is there to see this happen, and this being the enablement of privately supplied green electricity, in a way that doesn't compromise the municipal finances, if then let's try to do that. Let's start with something small. Let's get it working. Let's see if it works. Maybe it's done with 1 or 2 customers, as has been done with other wheeling pilot systems, and then scale from there. So it can start small, grow, solve the problems, add different classes of customers, add different types of transactions. So absolutely, I think sometimes we in South Africa have tried to not just reinvent the wheel, but reinvent the Formula One wheel and get it working perfectly. I think certainly we would like to try and collaborate with municipalities to make this work. Yeah.
Nick, you want to add that, any of that from the traditional perspective?
I don't have too much to add other than the traditional wheeling is a good first step to become well acquainted with the idea, but it wouldn't be something you could do practically on a large scale. So that's where something like token wheeling or a similar sort of concept would be more appropriate. It would be too difficult to try and reconcile everything, especially on an hourly basis when it's very manual.
Okay, great. Okay, so at this stage, we're going to do some of the polling work now. So we haven't flighted the poll as yet. So the poll will talk to what is your interest in terms of this, as well as your ability to explore follow-up discussions. So for those of you still on the call, if you can please submit your answers on the poll, and we can get that response through to Meridian at the moment. All right. So while we deal with the other questions, we'd really appreciate it if you can contribute and complete that poll. Some more questions while we're waiting for that to be done. So some compliments. Well done, Frank. That was a great explanation and exciting concept overall. Thanks for the answer, Frank. The comment was maybe blockchain tech can be used for this credit note validation purpose. Question from
Ralph. Yes.
Yeah, the question from Ralph Beralt is, how small can you go on the kilowatt per hour per RAN tokens? I'm thinking about residential generators for small systems which have bidirectional meters.
Absolutely. And I think this is the other value, because, the transaction costs are actually really, really low in this system. We would love to be able to enable even small residential customers, even township customers who might want to, set up a really small system and sell back to the grid in a simple way. This could enable that. I mean, maybe you would need different levels of validation because the scale is so much smaller in terms of the energy and the metering and the credibility around that. But that is the dream, really, that every size customer can be enabled to participate, whether it's 1 kilowatt hour or 100 kilowatt hours or a gigawatt hour, yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so another question from Ridwan Abrahams, and he says, will the exclusivity of selected generators not expose the electricity consumer to margin manipulation of the token purchase prices, this by the municipality or the electricity generator?
Sorry, I was just trying to properly understand the question. I don't think so, because this is a competitive environment to start off with. There's lots of different ways to do wheeling. We don't want to be the only player in this space. And note that the majority of we're not the IPP and we're not the generator. We're not setting the price of the actual energy transaction between the customer and the generator. That would be set separately, either through a token purchase agreement or other market mechanisms. In fact, we envisioned that if you could get liquidity in tokens, then it could be competitive to supply. If there's enough supply and demand, that it could actually drive the energy price down. If the token wheeling platform takes too much margin, they're also going to become uncompetitive against other competitive systems or other token wheeling platforms. So the intent is that actually, if this scales, we actually drive more competitiveness in the pricing of renewables and the supply of green electricity. And again, while protecting the municipalities' revenue margin to keep running the infrastructure, because they're still running the wires business. They need to make their money to keep the wires business alive. So this just really helps, as I say, if the more people do this, the more competitive it will actually get, which would then be good for pricing rather than you sort of being locked into the monopoly costs that we currently are.
Okay, so I'm gonna just open the floor again. We have no questions on the Q&A and nothing on the webinar chat as well. If there's any other questions, I think you can put them on now. However, I think, Frank, you're going to make yourself available going forward to answer any questions and also to be contactable.
Absolutely. Please email me. Would be very happy to engage directly. Yeah.
All right. So I don't see any more questions. And I'm happy to close the session a bit earlier, if that's okay with everyone. All right, so I think that brings us to the end of the session. Very valuable information from Nick in terms of the context of the environment that we're working in for Munichs and the Munich space, and I think from SALGA as well, of understanding the actual needs of the municipalities from a SALGA perspective. From your end, Frank, another great presentation giving more detail and I think simplifying the token wheeling, which has made it more informative and understandable to the extent that people were able to ask, I think, valuable questions in this session. Thank you to everyone. So what's going to happen in the next 2 days is the presentations and the recording will be made available to the email addresses used during the registration. So that content will be coming your way. So watch the space for that. And of course, thank you to Future Cities Africa, on whose platform this webinar is being hosted. Great job in facilitating this. And thank you again to our presenters and to all of those who have connected today. I hope you found the session valuable, and we'll be contacting Frank from your perspective of how you can use this tool going forward. So I think it's going to be the start of a very exciting journey in unlocking the complexities related to wheeling, which will enable easier access to distributed energy sources, which of course has a number of beneficial knock-on effects like increased generation investment and supporting the future electricity market. So to all of you, thanks a lot for attending. Thanks to the presenters, and have a great day further.